the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
This is Relevant in Rome, a weekly podcast from the Vatican with Relevant Radio Rome correspondent Ashley Noronha.
Yesterday was a historic day at the Vatican as two modern witnesses to the faith. Now Saints Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati were officially made saints of the Catholic Church by Pope Leo XIV.
Ad honorem sanctet individue Trinitas.
For the honor of the Blessed Trinity, the exaltation of the Catholic faith, and the increase of the Christian life, by the authority of our Lord Jesus Christ, and of the holy apostles Peter and Paul, and our own, after due deliberation and frequent prayer for divine assistance, and having sought the counsel of many of our brother bishops, we declare and define Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis to be saints, and we enroll them among the saints, decreeing that they are to be venerated as such by the whole Church.
And that was the big moment yesterday. Our thanks to Vatican Radio. Carlo Acutis, the teenager who used the internet to spread devotion to the Eucharist, and Pier Giorgio Frassati, the young man of the 20th century who dedicated his short life to service and prayer. Both have now been raised to the altars together. Joining us live is our Rome correspondent, Ashley Noronha, who was in St. Peter's Square yesterday for this unforgettable canonization Mass, is going to be sharing with us some of the highlights of this big celebration. Ashley, buongiorno. Thanks so much for joining us once again from Roma on this Monday morning.
Well, John, I will tell you, there is still excitement in the air. I think we're all walking a little bit on the clouds today after such an exciting weekend.
Yes, I got a chance to see some of it, and it really, really looked so exciting and so moving. What was it like to be there in St. Peter's Square yesterday for this historic canonization? Can you kind of paint a picture for us? A lot happened before and then after.
Yes, indeed. Well, I was there in the square with about 70,000 of my closest friends, people who had come from all over the world to be there because of their love for these two young saints. Saints really of our times. Saint Pier Giorgio Frassati, born in 1901, not so long ago, and of course Carlo Acutis. And it was just such an incredible and special moment as people who came from far and wide in order to be there because they wanted to unite and to show their love for two new saints. And so there was just this feeling of excitement, of joy. You know, some people camped out. Some people slept around St. Peter's Square in order to be there. And some others got there at the crack of dawn, getting there or even earlier. Actually, people coming at 3:30 in the morning in order to get in line to be the first when those gates opened at 7 a.m. to try to be as close to the front as possible to celebrate this momentous occasion. So it was quite an exciting day, John.
I can just imagine, and I couldn't help but notice Carlo Acutis' mom in the audience, along with some of his siblings. And, that's not typical. You don't usually see, the parents of a saint being canonized on hand for the ceremony.
No, you don't. In fact, St. Maria Goretti's mom was there at her canonization, but this is the first time that, at least in modern history, people are aware that an entire family was there. So sure enough, this meant that Carlo's twin brother and sister, Michele and Francesca, were there as well. And in fact, Michele read the first reading from the Book of Wisdom. And when Carlo lived, he was an only child. And after his passing, in a dream, his mom, Antonia, saw her son Carlo come to her and tell her that she would again become a mother. She didn't know that she would ever experience that again. But sure enough, at the age of 44, and then 4 years after his death, those twins were born. The family made a decision that the twins would basically stay out of the spotlight, and Antonia, his mother, Carlo's mother, would be the main spokesperson for the family. So this was really the first time that the world got to see those darling twins who are now the same age that Carlo was when he passed, John.
That is so unbelievable. It was also a big first for Pope Leo. That his very first canonization had to be really special for him as well.
Yeah, it was the first canonization of his papacy, which made it all the more exciting. And as we were there in the square, the Pope gave a little bit of a surprise. So before this solemn mass began, he actually came out to the square to the microphone and greeted everyone, saluted everyone. He gave a message saying that we are all called to be saints. And the idea was he wanted to share in the joy of all of the people who had gathered for this great event for the church and the world. Because, of course, this, as I mentioned, this is a mass. This is a solemn experience. And so this was a moment before the mass began where he could soak in that joy and share his own. And of course, you could imagine that the crowd was absolutely thrilled. So as I mentioned, there were about 70,000 people who had come from all over the world to celebrate these two saints. And even leading up to the big day, there was so much excitement. I mean, John, you remember that Carlo Acutis' canonization was originally scheduled for April. It was supposed to be on Divine Mercy Sunday during the Jubilee of Teens. And then Pier Giorgio Frassati's canonization was for August 3rd during the Jubilee of Youth. And Pope Leo XIV made that decision that he wanted to canonize them both together and chose yesterday's date of September 7th. So leading up to this day, throughout this weekend, it was really neat to see all of these different groups of people who were coming in from all over the world to be there. So people would carry flags, or maybe they would have bandanas or t-shirts that had their flag on it. So my husband John and I saw flags from Vietnam, from South Korea, from Japan, from Ireland, from Poland, all kinds of people who wanted to be there that day. Now, the night before the canonization, right there in St. Peter's Basilica, adoration was held. And so that was lovely because all of these young people from throughout the world spent time adoring Christ in the Eucharist, which of course we know that Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis, these two new saints, had such deep love for the Eucharist. And they, in their own lives, spoke about how they were propelled by the Eucharist and receiving Christ in the Eucharist every day. At a university here, there was a display detailing the life of Pier Giorgio Frassati, and even his axe, his pickaxe that he would use on his hikes, his mountain hikes, was brought down that people could pray there in front of and see. And then afterwards, Mrs. Acutis spoke to us. She was just beaming with joy, talking about of course, this long-awaited day, the canonization of her beloved son. And of course, he called the Eucharist the highway to heaven. And so as she spoke to us all, she said, why get caught in traffic? Why take another route when we know the way? Why waste time on anything else when we know that the Eucharist is indeed our highway to heaven? And of course, St. Carlo Acutis spent so much time also in adoration, in addition to making sure that he received the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus every day in Mass. Also, in addition to that, leading up to the canonization on Saturday afternoon, my husband John and I gave a talk called Making Your Life a Masterpiece, and it was about the virtues of Frassati and Acutis. So that was also very, very exciting. So in his homily, John, the Pope spoke about the virtues of these two great saints. He talked about the fact that in today's age, we see that they were both in love with Jesus. They were willing to give everything, but they also had a great devotion to the saints, to Our Lady, and through that, they were able to practice charity generously. He said, Even when illness struck them both, not even that stopped them from presenting themselves in a loving way, from offering themselves to God and to those around them. And the Holy Father also had some really great sound bites to think about. He talked about how we should all, in their example, be ready to embark on the adventure of life every day. He also said the greatest risk in life is to waste time outside of God's plan. So a good thing for us to remember. He said we have to abandon ourselves wholeheartedly to that adventure of life that God offers us. And then at the end, he invoked the intercession of Our Lady, especially asking for peace in the world and for all of us to remember to direct our lives upwards in ways that we can make our lives masterpieces, John.
Relevant in Rome is your weekly connection to the Vatican. Listen to live reports from Rome with Ashley Noronha every Wednesday morning at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central on Morning Air. And listen right here next week to Relevant in Rome for the latest news from the Vatican.